Imagine this, you're sitting in your wooden cabin in the backwoods of Tennessee in the early 1800s. The night is silent, the only sound the crackle of the fire. Suddenly, bang! A deafening knock rattles the walls. Then another. And another. You rush outside, but there's nothing there. Just the thick, choking darkness of the Adams countryside. This wasn't a one-time scare. It was the beginning of what would become one of the most terrifying hauntings in American history, the legend of the Bell Witch. Here's the crazy part, this wasn't just whispers or shadows in the dark. According to countless accounts, this entity spoke, screamed, and even laughed. And it wasn't just haunting random strangers. It targeted one family. The Bell family. John Bell was a farmer. Simple, hardworking, respected in his community. But when he moved his wife Lucy and their children to a quiet farm in Adams, Tennessee, he unknowingly invited something into his home that would destroy his life piece by piece. At first, it seemed harmless. Little scratching sounds in the walls. Faint whispers in the night. Objects moving just slightly out of place. But then, things escalated. The noises grew louder. Furniture shook violently. Doors slammed. And then came the voice. A chilling, mocking voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Wait. What? A ghost that talks? That's what made this story legendary. The Bell Witch wasn't silent. It taunted, insulted, and revealed secrets no one else could possibly know. Neighbors reported hearing it too. This wasn't just one family's nightmare, it spread through the entire community. But here's the twist, the Bell Witch seemed obsessed with two people in particular, John Bell himself, and his daughter, Betsy. John became the prime target of its wrath. He grew weaker by the day, plagued by mysterious ailments. And Betsy? The witch tormented her. Endlessly, whispering in her ear, clawing at her when no one was around. She was even slapped and scratched by invisible hands, leaving marks that horrified her family. Now imagine being a teenager in the 1800s, with no electricity, no police who'd believe you, and no escape. That's the terror Betsy faced every night. And here's the real kicker, the Bell Witch didn't just haunt. It prophesied. It predicted events that would come true, from local tragedies to distant news. This wasn't just a haunting. It was an intelligence, something that fed on fear, and the more people talked about it, the stronger it seemed to become. By the time word spread through Adams, Tennessee, the Bell Farm had become a stage for one of the strangest, darkest legends in American folklore. And the worst part? The story hadn't even reached its most chilling chapter yet. Because soon, the Bell Witch would claim a life. Who would be the first victim of America's most infamous spirit? The scratching and knocking were bad enough. But one cold night, the Bells heard something far worse. A voice. At first, it was just a low murmur, like wind moving through the cracks of the cabin. But then, words formed. Clear. Sharp. Mocking. John Bell, it hissed. I've come for you. The family froze. No one was speaking. No one could be. The voice didn't sound like any of them. It came from the shadows, from the walls, from everywhere at once. What made this terrifying was not just the sound, but the intelligence behind it. This wasn't random noise. It mocked the family. It insulted their prayers. It laughed when they cried. And then, in the dead of night, it sang. Hymns. But twisted, broken, warped into something sinister. Wait. What? A ghost that sings church songs? The Bells couldn't believe what they were hearing. But neighbors soon came to witness it themselves. One night, when visitors gathered, the voice boomed so loudly that the entire cabin shook. Some said it sounded like an old woman, others like a growling man. But everyone agreed, it was not human. The entity began sharing secrets. Dark, private things no outsider could know. A neighbor gasped when the witch recited a detail from his childhood, something he had never told a soul. That's when fear spread beyond the Bell family. This wasn't just their haunting anymore. It was the community's. And then came the twist that cemented the Bell Witch's place in history. The voice declared that it would never leave John Bell in peace. I will torment him until his last breath. From that night forward, John was no longer just a farmer. He was the chosen enemy of something unholy. But why John Bell? What had he done to deserve the wrath of the Bell Witch? While John Bell faced the witch's curses, his daughter Betsy became its favorite victim. She was just a teenager, innocent and hopeful. But the witch twisted her life into a waking nightmare. It started with whispers in her ear. Late at night, she'd feel hot breath on her neck, though no one was there. Then came the scratches. Angry red welts appeared across her arms and face. At first, her family thought she'd done it herself, but one night the truth was undeniable. As Betsy prayed by her bedside, an invisible hand slapped her so hard she fell to the floor. Her screams brought the family running. When they lifted her up, the shape of a handprint was burned red across her cheek. Wait, what? A ghost that leaves bruises? This was no ordinary haunting. This was physical. Violent. The torment only grew worse. Betsy would wake choking, gasping for air, as though unseen hands were strangling her. Neighbors witnessed her hair being yanked straight up, pulled by something they could not see. They tried to fight back, grabbing her, pulling her free, but their hands met nothing. Word spread fast, the Bell Witch wasn't just a voice. It was a predator. And Betsy Bell was its prey. The worst came when the witch taunted her about her future. Betsy was engaged to Joshua Gardner, a young man from the community. But the witch made it clear, this marriage would never happen. If you wed him, Betsy, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Betsy cried, begged, pleaded. But the more she resisted, the harder the witch lashed out. Her once bright spirit dimmed. Her laughter vanished. Betsy Bell became a shell of the girl she once was. And yet, the witch's obsession with John Bell was even darker and deadlier. John Bell, the proud head of the family, was crumbling. His once strong body grew weak. His face pale. His hands shook constantly. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe without pain. The witch delighted in his suffering. Night after night, its voice jeered, "Old Jack Bell will die. He will not escape me." Neighbors confirmed that John would suddenly fall to the ground, writhing in agony, as if poisoned. His tongue swelled. His vision blurred. Doctors were baffled, no medicine worked. But the witch claimed responsibility. "I cursed him," it hissed. "And I will not rest until he is gone." The family watched helplessly as John's strength faded. His farm, once thriving, began to collapse under his illness. The land seemed cursed. Crops failed. Animals sickened. And through it all, the witch laughed. Here's the chilling part: whenever John tried to pray, the witch drowned out his words with mocking hymns. Whenever he tried to speak, it interrupted, louder and louder, until his voice was silenced. And yet, as much as it hated John, it adored his wife Lucy. The spirit often called her the most perfect woman, and even brought her gifts, strange fruits left on the porch, mysterious flowers that no one could identify. Lucy, horrified, refused them. But the witch persisted. The contrast was horrifying. John cursed. Betsy beaten. Lucy praised. This wasn't random. It was personal. But soon, the entire community would see for themselves. And what they witnessed would turn Adams, Tennessee, into the center of America's most terrifying legend. By now, the Bell haunting was no family secret. Word spread across Adams like wildfire. Farmers, preachers, skeptics, and thrill-seekers all came to the Bell farm to hear the witch for themselves. And shockingly, it performed for them. Visitors reported hearing it laugh, curse, and mimic their own voices. Some swore they felt cold hands grip their shoulders. Others claimed the witch whispered their darkest thoughts aloud, humiliating them in front of the crowd. The Bell home became a spectacle. Crowds gathered nightly, straining to hear the unearthly voice. Some said it spoke in perfect sermons. Others that it sang haunting ballads in tones no human throat could create. But the most terrifying night came when the witch shouted a prophecy before dozens of witnesses. "John Bell will die. His time is short." The crowd gasped. A prophecy like that wasn't just words, it was a death sentence. And if the witch could predict tragedy for John, what else could it foresee? Neighbors left shaken, convinced they'd seen something beyond human understanding. Even skeptics walked away pale and silent. Whatever this was, it wasn't a hoax. But then, the witch went further. It began predicting events that actually came true. The Bell Witch's voice grew bolder, sharper, stronger. It no longer confined itself to taunts, it delivered prophecies. And to the horror of everyone in Adams, they came true. One day, it predicted the death of a local child. Days later, the child drowned in the river. Another time, it warned of an illness striking a neighbor's livestock. Within a week, the herd was gone. The whisper spread, this was not a simple haunting. This was a power that knew the future. Even more unsettling, the witch mocked religion itself. When preachers gathered to pray over the Bell home, the spirit recited their sermons word for word in a mocking tone. It sang hymns with a beauty so haunting that listeners wept, only to twist the lyrics into curses that chilled them to the bone. Imagine standing in a candlelit cabin while an invisible force sings funeral dirges in your ear. That's what the Bells endured. But perhaps the most shocking moment came when the witch declared it would not stop until John Bell was dead. It didn't whisper it, it screamed it. Loud enough for neighbors across the fields to hear. And soon, the prophecy of John Bell's death would begin its dreadful countdown. If the Bell Witch's voice was terrifying, its prophecies were worse. Because unlike empty threats, these predictions started coming true, one by one. It began with whispers about a neighbor's child. The witch claimed the boy would never see another sunrise. The Bells tried to ignore it, praying the words were just cruel tricks. But days later, the child drowned in the Red River. The exact event the witch described. The community gasped. Coincidence? Or proof that this entity knew something humans could not? Then, another prophecy. This time, the witch declared that a local woman's cattle would die suddenly. Within a week, her herd collapsed, their bodies scattered across the pasture. No disease, no explanation. Just dead. By now, the Bells weren't the only ones losing sleep. Entire households in Adams, Tennessee, lived in fear that the witch might speak their names next. Because when it did, tragedy followed. Here's the wait. What moment, the Bell Witch even predicted events happening miles away, things no one in Adams could have known yet. On one chilling night, it told the Bells about a family relative in North Carolina who had died suddenly. The next day, a messenger arrived with the same news. The time and details matched perfectly. This wasn't just a haunting. This was an all-seeing force. A voice in the dark that could pierce time itself. Some began to whisper that the Bell Witch wasn't a ghost at all, but a demon. Others said it was a witch who had cursed John Bell from beyond the grave. A few believed it was Satan himself, speaking through the shadows of the cabin. And yet, despite the fear, people couldn't stay away. The more it happened, the more curious the outside world became. Neighbors traveled miles to test the spirit, asking it questions about their past or daring it to predict their futures. And every time, it answered. And every time, it was right. The witch had become the dark oracle of Tennessee. Its power growing, its legend spreading. But here's the chilling twist, while it gave warnings to some, it saved its cruelest predictions for John Bell. Night after night, it whispered his doom. You will not live much longer, old Jack. Your time grows short. Every day, John weakened. Every night, the prophecy echoed louder. And now, the town of Adams was caught in a deadly guessing game. Were they witnessing the greatest hoax in American history, or the work of a force that could see the future? And if the witch's prophecies kept coming true, who would be next? If the Bell Witch's prophecies rattled Adams, what came next shattered the town's sense of safety. Because now, the spirit wasn't just predicting the future, it was exposing the past. One evening, as neighbors gathered inside the Bell home, the voice erupted with a chilling laugh. Then, it turned to a visitor in the corner and said his name. The man froze. The witch began describing, in haunting detail, an event from his childhood, something shameful he had never told another living soul. His face drained of color. He swore, trembling, that the story was true. Wait. What? How could a disembodied voice know that? It didn't stop there. Another night, it recited the exact words of a private conversation two townsfolk had days earlier in their barn. A conversation no one else could possibly have overheard. And yet, here it was, repeated word for word by a voice no one could see. The crowd gasped. Some crossed themselves. Others ran for the door. Because suddenly, the haunting wasn't just John Bell's problem. The witch was prying into everyone's lives. The most terrifying twist? It seemed to know things people hadn't even admitted to themselves. One woman fainted when the witch accused her of a secret affair. When she awoke, she sobbed, confirming it was true. Another man, red with anger, shouted that the witch was lying, only for the entity to reveal proof, naming dates, places, and details no outsider could know. His protest crumbled into silence. The witch didn't just torment, it humiliated. It fed on shame, dragging private sins into the open. It wasn't enough to frighten its victims, it wanted to break them. By now, skeptics were in short supply. Too many had seen too much. Too many secrets laid bare. And the Bell home transformed into something unholy, a stage where fear was the performance, and the entire town was the audience. But even in the chaos, the witch showed a chilling sense of choice. It didn't expose everyone. It picked its targets with surgical cruelty. And one name always echoed louder than the rest, John Bell. Night after night, the witch returned to him, cursing his name, predicting his death, calling him a hypocrite, a sinner, a man doomed to be destroyed. And every time it spoke, John's body grew weaker. His hands shook. His skin turned gray. He looked less like a man and more like a shadow. But then, something strange happened. For all its cruelty, the Bell witch seemed to spare one person in the family. Why was Lucy Bell, the matriarch, treated so differently? By now, John and Betsy Bell were the witch's favorite victims, cursed, slapped, scratched, and taunted nightly. But Lucy Bell? She was different. The witch didn't attack her. It praised her. In a voice that chilled the blood of everyone listening, the spirit declared Lucy to be the purest woman alive. It called her kind, gentle, blessed. While John groaned in pain, writhing from his mysterious illness, the witch whispered blessings to Lucy. It even promised to protect her. Wait. What? A ghost that plays favorites? The contrast was sickening. John, her husband, was wasting away under curses. Betsy, her daughter, was slapped and choked until she wept. But Lucy? Lucy was given strange gifts. One morning, the family found baskets of fruit left mysteriously on the porch. Another night, wildflowers appeared on the windowsill, placed there by unseen hands. The family didn't know what to do. Were these gifts a trap? Or was the witch truly showing respect? Lucy herself was horrified. She wanted no favors from a spirit that destroyed her family. She prayed for peace, for the torment to end, but the witch only laughed. Neighbors were stunned. Why would a spirit that mocked preachers, cursed children, and poisoned men suddenly admire Lucy Bell? Some whispered she had unknowingly made a pact. Others said her faith was so unshakable that even the witch had to bow to it. The irony cut deep. Lucy's piety and goodness seemed to protect her, but it also isolated her. While she was spared, she had to watch helplessly as her husband withered and her daughter screamed night after night. Imagine the agony of being untouchable to the witch, yet powerless to save the ones you loved most. The witch's obsession with Lucy didn't stop there. When John's condition worsened, the spirit taunted him, saying, "If not for Lucy, you'd already be in the grave." as if Lucy's very existence was delaying the inevitable. And here's the on nights when Lucy prayed aloud, the witch grew silent. The house still shook, voices still whispered, but during Lucy's prayers the mocking laughter stopped. It was as if the spirit had no power over her words. The Bell family clung to this fragile hope, begging Lucy to pray longer, louder, hoping her presence could shield them all. But the witch made it clear, it would never stop until John Bell was gone. And while Lucy was praised, another target was about to suffer the witch's cruelest blow. Betsy Bell's engagement would soon unravel under the spirit's wrath. What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted? That's exactly what the Bell family was about to find out. For weeks, John Bell Sr. had been calling in neighbors, preachers, even so-called witch hunters, to drive out the spirit. But the Bell witch wasn't just watching, she was laughing. At first, she struck with taunts and whispers, calling out secrets no one should know. One night, a neighbor claimed he heard the witch sneer, "You fight shadows with shadows. I am the night itself." And then, the attacks escalated. A group of men armed with muskets stormed into the Bell cabin, determined to smoke her out. But the moment they raised their weapons, their barrels bent like soft clay. The guns twisted in their hands, useless. What force could bend iron like straw? The men fled in terror, but the witch wasn't finished. The very next evening, a preacher was dragged from his horse by invisible hands on the Bell property. His Bible was ripped apart, page by page, the shreds tossed into the fire while the family watched in horror. Faith itself seemed powerless against her. By now, the Bell witch had grown bolder, she no longer confined herself to the cabin. Neighbors half a mile away began hearing her voice echo through the hills, mocking John Bell, "Old Jack will not escape me, the end draws near." But the darkest twist came when she turned her fury not on John, but on Betsy. Late one night, Betsy's bed was violently flipped upside down, slamming her to the floor. As she screamed, claw marks appeared across her arms, deep, red, and burning, as if seared by fire. And in the silence that followed, the witch whispered something chilling. "The child is mine." Was the Bell witch after John Bell's soul, or his daughter's? The attacks were no longer random, they were personal, targeted, escalating. John Bell began to wither, coughing up blood, his body frail as if poisoned. Betsy, meanwhile, trembled nightly in her sleep, haunted by the witch's laughter. And the family realized something terrifying, every attempt to fight back only made the witch stronger. For the Bell witch, this was no haunting. This was war. And the battlefield was about to spill far beyond the Bell farm. Imagine sitting in the Bell cabin one cold autumn night. The lamps flicker, shadows dance across the walls, and suddenly, out of the silence, a voice erupts from the air itself. Not a whisper. Not a faint echo. A full, booming voice. Clear. Sharp. Terrifying. This was no longer scratching on the walls or knocking at doors. The Bell witch had learned to speak. And her first words? Mockery. She laughed at the Bell family, ridiculed their prayers, and sang hymns in a distorted, mocking tone. But here's the twist, witnesses swore she could speak in multiple voices at once. One moment, the voice was that of an old woman. The next, it was a young girl. Then a deep man's tone echoed from the same spot in mid-air. It was as if an entire chorus of invisible spirits had taken over the cabin. What kind of force can bend its voice into many? Neighbors didn't believe it, until they came to hear it for themselves. Soon, dozens of people packed the Bell home at night, waiting in silence, daring the spirit to speak. And when it did, the room froze in terror. The witch called them by name, and revealed secrets no one else could possibly know. The entity mocked ministers, quoting scripture back at them perfectly, yet twisting it into curses. The voice began revealing hidden sins of the visitors. A farmer who cheated his neighbor, a woman hiding an affair, a man who stole money years earlier. One by one, their faces turned pale as the Bell witch exposed them in front of the crowd. Word spread like wildfire. Within weeks, people traveled from miles around just to hear the Bell witch's voice. Some came for proof of the supernatural. Others came out of morbid curiosity. But all left shaken. This wasn't just a haunting anymore, this was a public spectacle. Eyewitnesses claimed the witch could even mimic voices of people who weren't there. Once, John Bell's own voice echoed through the cabin, while he sat silently in his chair. Another time, the witch sang in the exact voice of Betsy Bell. Imagine hearing your own voice, speaking from the dark, while your lips never moved. The witch wasn't just tormenting the Bells anymore. She was building an audience. And with every performance, her power seemed to grow. But here's the real cliffhanger: the Bell Witch soon began to speak of the future. Prophesies. Predictions. Warnings. And one of them pointed directly at the death of John Bell. By now, the Bell family was broken. Night after night, the torment had only grown worse. But just when they thought it couldn't escalate further, the witch revealed a new power, one that would send chills across Robertson County. It started with whispers in the dark. At first, the entity merely mocked them, laughing in the walls, repeating prayers backwards. But then, it began to speak names. Names it shouldn't have known. One evening, as Lucy Bell prayed aloud, the voice interrupted. It called out the full name of a neighbor, along with details of a private scandal only that neighbor's family knew. The Bells froze. How could this thing possibly know? The very next morning, news arrived from down the road. That scandal? It was true. Exactly as the witch had said. The community gasped. Suddenly, the Bell Witch wasn't just tormenting one family, it was exposing secrets, tearing open wounds that people thought were buried. Soon, gatherings formed around the Bell home. Neighbors came not just out of fear, but out of curiosity. And the witch didn't disappoint. In front of stunned crowds, it revealed the hidden sins of the town: cheating husbands, stolen money, secret feuds. Each time, the details proved correct. There was no denying it. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. And the worst part? The witch spoke in multiple voices. Sometimes it was the shrill cackle of an old woman. Other times, it was the deep, commanding tone of a preacher. Once, it even mimicked a child, crying out so realistically that visitors searched the house, thinking a baby had been abandoned. The Bells no longer felt safe in their own home. Every conversation, every whispered thought, might be overheard by the entity. People began to say the Bell Witch wasn't just haunting the family, it was listening, watching, and feeding on every dark truth it uncovered. But here's where it gets even creepier. In one chilling moment, the witch revealed knowledge of things that hadn't even happened yet. Prophesies. Predictions. Some dismissed them as tricks. But when those predictions began coming true, the legend of the Bell Witch exploded into something far larger than a family haunting. This was no longer about scratching in the walls or ghostly knocks. This was about a supernatural force that could see into people's souls. The Bells had lost control of their lives, their privacy, and their future. And the entire county was now hooked on one terrifying question. If the witch could reveal everyone's secrets, who would she expose next? The Bell family thought they could fight the entity with prayer. Every night, they gathered in the flickering glow of a single oil lamp, clutching their Bibles, their voices trembling as they recited scripture. But what happened next would shatter their faith forever. As John Bell's voice echoed through the room, reciting Psalm 23, a sound rose from the darkness, a second voice. Low at first, then growing louder. The spirit was reciting the exact same verse, word for word. Except its voice wasn't human. It was sharp. Mocking. Twisting holy words into venom. The family froze. Their prayers turned to silence. And then came the voice shifted. It began repeating their own words, in their own voices. John heard himself praying back at him. Betsy heard her own frightened pleas echoed from the shadows. Suddenly, the lamp flickered and blew out. Darkness swallowed the room. In the blackness, the entity whispered, not scripture, but secrets. Private sins. Shames the family thought were buried. Things no one outside those walls could ever know. The children screamed. Lucy Bell clutched her cross, demanding the spirit leave them in peace. But then came the voice laughed and declared, I will never leave. I am bound here, as long as the bells breathe. That night, no one slept. They sat in silence, too afraid to speak, too afraid to pray. Because now they knew, their enemy wasn't just haunting their home, it was inside their lives, watching, listening, and waiting. But the most chilling moment came just before dawn. As the first light crept through the shutters, the spirit whispered one final line that would haunt them for years. The Bible will not save you, and neither will God. And in that moment, the Bell family realized the battle had only just begun. The Bell Witch wasn't finished. If anything, she was just getting started. And now, she made her most dangerous move yet, offering a deal that no one in Red River dared accept. It began on a freezing winter night in 1820. John Bell lay in bed, his health declining fast. His family huddled in silence when a voice cut through the darkness. John will never rise again. His time is mine. The witch claimed she would decide the exact day of his death. But here's the shocking part, she didn't stop there. She began bargaining with the family. One by one, she whispered offers to John's children. To Betsy, she hissed, break your heart, break your vow, and I'll leave you free. To John Jr., she growled, stand against me, and I'll crush this house forever. It was as if she wanted to turn the Bells against each other, testing whether loyalty or survival would win. At first, the family ignored her threats. But then something terrifying happened. Food began to rot overnight. Meat spoiled in the smokehouse. Bread turned black with mold in minutes. Even water from the well bubbled as if poisoned. The witch whispered, eat. And you eat death. The Bells were starving, terrified to touch their own food. And then came the worst betrayal of all. One morning, Lucy Bell, the kindest woman in Red River, found a vial of strange, black liquid near John's bedside. The witch mocked her, claiming it was poison she had slipped into his medicine. But here's the twist, when John Jr. gave a few drops of that liquid to a barn cat, the animal convulsed and died instantly. The family now knew, this wasn't just haunting. It was murder in slow motion. Neighbors came running when they heard the screams, but the witch only laughed, her voice booming so loud it carried across the fields, John Bell will die by my hand. Nothing you do can stop it. And yet, in the middle of this horror, the witch did something no one expected. She showered Lucy Bell with kindness. She left baskets of fresh fruit on the doorstep. She sang hymns in a soft, almost angelic voice when Lucy prayed. She even declared Lucy to be the purest woman alive. Why would a spirit bent on destruction suddenly protect the mother of the house? Was this mercy, or just another twisted game? That winter, the family realized the witch wasn't simply haunting them, she was choosing them apart, piece by piece. And John Bell was running out of time. But what happened next would prove the witch wasn't bluffing. She was about to strike her deadliest blow. The Bell Witch wasn't just tormenting the Bell family at random anymore. By the time the winter winds howled across Adams, Tennessee, her attacks became strategic, surgical. She wasn't scattering chaos, she was studying her prey. And in every predator's hunt, there's always a weakest link. At first, the family thought the spirit hated John Bell most. After all, he was the head of the household, the one she insulted, mocked, and physically struck. But then came the nights when she shifted her focus. Suddenly, young Betsy Bell, already worn down by endless nightmares, became her primary target. And here's the chilling part, the witch didn't just scream or scratch this time. She whispered into Betsy's dreams. Betsy would wake up in cold sweats, claiming the voice told her to end her engagement to Joshua Gardner. Why Joshua? Why now? Nobody knew. But the witch's voice didn't stop. Over and over, it hissed. Do not marry him, or I'll make you regret it. That's when the Bells realized the haunting wasn't just physical anymore, it was psychological warfare. And then came the first. Betsy wasn't the only one hearing it. Her friends at school, girls her own age, swore they heard a woman's voice mocking them on their way home. Some even claimed they were slapped or had their hair yanked by invisible hands. Word spread. Suddenly, the haunting wasn't confined to the Bell home, it was infecting the entire community. But here's where it gets darker. The witch seemed to enjoy their confusion. One night, when a group of neighbors gathered to pray for the Bells, the witch interrupted with a flawless recital of every prayer, backward. Not only was she powerful, she was mocking their faith. And then, another twist. The Bell children weren't just victims, they were becoming weapons. Little Richard Bell, barely 10 years old, would suddenly burst into laughter at the sound of the witch's voice, repeating her words perfectly. It was as if she was using him as a puppet. Neighbors started whispering, was the Bell witch real? Or had she already possessed one of the children? By the end of that winter, Adams was divided. Some believed the Bells were cursed, others thought they were lying. But one fact no one could deny. The witch was growing stronger. And her obsession with Betsy Bell was only the beginning of something far more sinister. Because soon, she wasn't just going to break Betsy's spirit. She was going to destroy her entire future. The torment had grown sharper, meaner, almost sadistic. By the fall of 1818, the Bell family no longer feared the ghostly voice, they feared the thing they couldn't see but could feel. Because this spirit didn't just whisper anymore. It hit. It started with Betsy. One evening, as she tried to sew by lamplight, she suddenly screamed. Her brothers rushed in, and froze. Her hands were red, welted as though someone had lashed her with an invisible whip. Within days, bruises began appearing on her arms, her back, her neck. The blows came in silence, sometimes in front of her family, sometimes alone in the dark. No matter where she was, the unseen hand found her. But Betsy wasn't the only target. One night, Richard Bell, John's eldest son, bolted awake when he felt a hand grip his throat. He clawed at the air, but nothing was there. His siblings swore they saw his body lift an inch off the bed as though being strangled by something that wasn't human. And here's the kicker, the more they prayed, the harder the attacks got. It was as if the spirit fed off their fear, mocking their faith. The spirit began imitating their voices. Imagine hearing your father call from another room, only to walk in and find him fast asleep. Imagine hearing your sister giggle in the hallway, only to realize she was downstairs the whole time. Visitors weren't safe either. A neighbor named James Johnson stayed the night to prove the Bells were exaggerating. He left before sunrise with claw marks across his chest and a look of terror that never left his face. The entity started predicting things, little accidents, neighbors falling ill, horses going lame. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence. But when each prediction came true with chilling accuracy, the town began whispering, was this spirit a demon, or a witch who could see the future? The Bell home became a stage for nightly torture. Knocks rattled the walls, dishes flew from shelves, the children were slapped by unseen hands. Every scream, every cry, only seemed to make the presence stronger. What no one knew then was that these violent assaults were building toward something darker. This wasn't random cruelty. It was a countdown. And John Bell, the patriarch, was at the center of it. Because in a matter of months, the Bell witch wouldn't just slap and scratch. She would claim her first victim. The Bell children thought they were prepared. They had grown used to the thumps in the walls, the whispers in the dark, the faint tug on their blankets at night. But nothing prepared them for this. It was just after midnight when Richard Bell dared his brothers to stay awake in the parlor until the spirit showed itself. He wanted proof, solid proof, that they weren't imagining things. He lit 2 candles, placed them on the table, and sat shoulder to shoulder with his siblings, waiting. At first, nothing. Just silence. Then, a cold wind swept through the room, though every door was locked shut. The candle flames bent sideways, almost snuffed out, before flickering back. Suddenly, the Bible on the table slammed shut with a deafening crack. The children froze. Their dare had been answered. Richard swallowed hard. If you're real, he whispered into the shadows, show yourself. And then it happened. The rocking chair in the corner began moving, slowly at first, then violently, as if an invisible figure was sitting in it, rocking furiously. The chair legs scraped the floorboards loud enough to wake the entire house. But the spirit wasn't finished. It wanted more. The poker by the fireplace lifted off the ground and swung into the air like a sword, clattering against the stone hearth before slamming onto the rug. The younger Bell children screamed, rushing to the stairs, but Richard stood frozen in the parlor. "Why us?" he shouted, his voice breaking. "What do you want from my family?" The air answered with a voice, low, guttural, and unmistakably human. "I hate your father," it hissed. The words sent chills down Richard's spine. This wasn't random mischief. This was personal. When John Bell rushed downstairs, the spirit fell silent, as though mocking him. Only Richard and his siblings had heard the voice. But the terror was undeniable. The Bell family wasn't just haunted, they were being hunted. And the more they challenged it, the stronger it seemed to grow. The year was drawing to a close, but the shadow of Nancy Dean Morgan's murder refused to fade. By winter of 1970, whispers about her death had spread far beyond North Carolina's borders. Newspapers that once ignored mountain tragedies began printing her name. But with every article came a new layer of suspicion, new theories, and even wilder rumors. And then, an anonymous letter arrived at the sheriff's office. It was written in jagged handwriting, the ink smudged like the writer was trembling. "You'll never find Nancy's killer, because you already know him." Those words shook the entire investigation. Was it a hoax? Or had someone close to Nancy finally cracked under the weight of their guilt? The sheriff tried to keep it quiet, but word leaked, and soon the entire town was buzzing. Neighbors began accusing one another, friendships turned to feuds, and family dinners ended with slammed doors and shouted threats. And then came the strangest twist yet. A preacher from a nearby county publicly declared that Nancy's ghost had appeared to him in a dream. He swore she whispered the name of her killer, but he refused to reveal it. Why? He claimed, "If I speak it aloud, more will die." This wasn't just a murder anymore, it was becoming folklore, legend, and nightmare all rolled into one. Children were warned not to walk home alone after dark. Mothers locked their doors twice. And the men of the town? They carried rifles on their porches, swearing the killer would never strike again, but secretly wondering if he already lived next door. But the most chilling twist was yet to come. A woman stepped forward, someone who had been silent since the night of Nancy's disappearance. She claimed she had seen Nancy that evening, walking with a man in a dark hat and long coat. Her words painted a vivid, terrifying picture. The description fit almost every man in town. Now the investigators were back at square one, chasing shadows in a town where nearly everyone looked guilty. Each clue led to another dead end. Each witness contradicted the last. Each new rumor was darker than the one before. Nancy's death wasn't just unsolved, it was mutating into something more dangerous. It was tearing the town apart from the inside. And the cruelest part? The killer was still out there, watching it all unfold. The sun dipped low over the Appalachian ridges, casting jagged shadows that swallowed the little town whole. But inside the sheriff's office, the tension burned brighter than daylight. Whispers had grown into storms. People spoke of ghosts in the forest, of a figure in black who walked with purpose, and of a secret buried so deep, it could tear families apart if ever revealed. Sheriff Caldwell leaned over the battered oak desk, his trembling hands gripping a faded file. In it lay reports no one dared read aloud, sightings, anonymous letters, and warnings scrawled in jagged ink. She was not the first. She will not be the last. His deputy wanted to burn the papers, to bury them before panic spread. But Caldwell knew the truth, silence was more dangerous than the shadows. That night, as lanterns flickered on porches and the town tried to drown fear in hymns, a stranger appeared. He walked with a limp, his face hidden beneath a brimmed hat, his coat dragging the dirt behind him. Children froze mid-play, mothers pulled their little ones inside, and even the tavern fell silent as the man stepped through the swinging doors. "Drink," he rasped, dropping coins that rang too loud in the silence. But it wasn't the sound of his voice that shook them, it was the scar carved deep across his jaw, a mark known only to a handful who remembered the night Nancy vanished. Word spread like wildfire, the man with the scar is back. The next morning, tracks were found near the old mining road, leading toward the hollow where locals swore they heard screams on windy nights. The sheriff organized a search party, rifles in hand, hounds barking, lanterns swinging like fiery halos in the fog. Every step deeper into the hollow felt like trespassing into another world, one where trees leaned closer, and the earth seemed to whisper secrets meant to stay buried. Then came the discovery. A shallow grave. The earth freshly disturbed. The men stood frozen, the dogs whining low, their ears pinned back in dread. Sheriff Caldwell knelt, brushing away the damp soil until fragments of fabric emerged, tattered, faded, and unmistakably belonging to Nancy Dean Morgan. But here's the chilling twist, beneath that cloth lay not one body, but two. One small, one grown. And carved into a nearby tree, burned into the bark with cruel precision, was a single symbol, an eye with a tear running down its cheek. The men backed away, their courage cracking. This isn't just murder, one whispered. This is a message. The hollow fell silent. Only the wind answered. And with it came the realization that the killer was watching, waiting, daring them to look deeper into the abyss. Because whoever left that grave wanted them to know, this was only the beginning. But just when everyone thought the violence had reached its peak, a shocking betrayal ripped through the feud. One of the McCoys, sworn by blood to protect his kin, secretly crossed enemy lines. Under the cover of darkness, he slipped into the Hatfield camp, whispering secrets that would doom his own family. And what he revealed was enough to ignite a storm that no one could stop. The Hatfields learned about a hidden McCoy supply route, where ammunition and food were smuggled into their stronghold. If the Hatfields struck there, the McCoys would collapse within weeks. But here's the twist, this wasn't just about survival. This traitor wasn't driven by loyalty to the Hatfields, he was driven by jealousy, envy, and a thirst for revenge against his own blood. The next morning, before the sun even broke through the fog, the Hatfields unleashed an ambush. Shots tore through the air, wagons went up in flames, and the McCoys found themselves cornered, blindsided, and betrayed. And in that moment, the line between family and enemy blurred forever. The question that haunted everyone after wasn't who fired the first shot that day, it was who within the McCoys had turned their back on their own blood. A ghostly silence fell after the battle, and paranoia spread like wildfire. No one knew who to trust anymore. Brother eyed brother, cousin accused cousin. And from that moment forward, the feud wasn't just Hatfield against McCoy, it was Hatfield against McCoy, and McCoy against McCoy. What if your worst nightmare left a final message, and then disappeared? The air in the Bell household lay heavy with dread. It had been years since John Bell's death, years of broken windows, whispered curses, and cold laughter fading into silence. The family thought it was over. But then, in the dead of night, Lucy Bell awoke to a single word carved into her bedroom door: return. No voice. No knocking. Just that chilling command, burned straight into the wood. Was it a threat? A warning? Or the last spark of something still watching? Then came a second message, this time whispered through the walls as if the house itself was breathing the words, "I'll be back." Here, in her deepest sleep, Lucy felt it again. The witch wasn't gone. She had simply vanished, for a while. Silence swallowed the room again. The wind howled. The children held each other close, too terrified to speak. Outside, snow began falling, silent, relentless, ghostly. But Lucy couldn't sleep. Because the final piece of the haunting puzzle had already been placed. The next morning, near John Bell's gravestone, neighbors discovered fresh footprints, right into thin air. Heavy boots, pressed into the ground in the freshly fallen snow, and then nothing. It was as though someone walked away into another world. A half step between life and legend. Then Lucy heard the voice again. Distant, but unmistakable. Remember me. Her blood ran cold. The witch wasn't just haunting memories. She was making sure she wasn't forgotten. Imagine this, a quiet Tennessee farmhouse in the early 1800s, where every night, whispers slither through the walls, furniture shakes without reason, and an unseen force torments a family until death follows. This wasn't a Hollywood script. This was the reality of the Bell family in Adams, Tennessee, home to one of America's most chilling and enduring legends, the Bell Witch. The story begins with John Bell, a respected farmer who suddenly became the target of relentless supernatural attacks. Strange noises echoed in his home, scratching, knocking, even chains dragging across the floor. His children claimed to see a shadowy woman, and his daughter Betsy suffered violent assaults from an unseen hand. But here's where it gets darker. The entity wasn't just a mindless spirit. It spoke. Witnesses claimed the Bell Witch had a voice, mocking, taunting, and even predicting future events with terrifying accuracy. At first, neighbors dismissed it as superstition. But soon, dozens of people, including prominent community members, reported hearing the witch's voice for themselves. Some said it sang hymns, others said it cursed and threatened anyone who dared challenge it. What made the haunting infamous was its apparent obsession with John Bell himself. The witch vowed to kill him, and in 1820, John Bell mysteriously died after slipping into a strange illness. By his bedside was a vial of unknown liquid. The witch allegedly bragged about poisoning him. And here comes this haunting wasn't a fleeting tale whispered in barns and firelit cabins. It became so notorious that even General Andrew Jackson, who later became President of the United States, reportedly visited the Bell farm. Legend says his men experienced such terrifying phenomena that they fled the property, refusing to return. For centuries, the Bell Witch story has gripped Tennessee folklore. But today, it's exploding online again. TikTok creators share chilling reenactments. Paranormal podcasts dissect the story, and YouTube documentaries attract millions of views. Why? Because unlike ghost stories trapped in the past, the Bell Witch legend refuses to die. Visitors still claim to hear whispers near the Bell Witch Cave, a tourist site tied to the haunting. Social media has revived the old question: was it a demonic force, or could it have been a psychological curse amplified by community hysteria? What makes the Bell Witch different from other hauntings is its persistence. Most ghost stories fade with time. This one only grows stronger, adapting to each generation. The fear that something unseen, intelligent, and malicious might still linger in Adams, Tennessee, keeps the legend alive. And the scariest part? If the witch truly exists, her promise wasn't just to torment the Bells, but to haunt anyone who doubts her story. What if your worst nightmare lived beneath your feet, in total darkness, waiting to be let out? They say the Bell Witch didn't vanish with John Bell's death. Instead, she retreated into the very heart of the earth itself. Hidden beneath the family's land lies a narrow, winding cavern that she claimed as her lair. The cave remains there, carved into the red Tennessee rock, an unmarked witness to centuries-old terror. As locals rediscovered the cave in modern times, thrill-seekers and paranormal buffs descended into its depths. Some claimed to feel invisible fingers brush their necks, or the whisper of a familiar mocking voice in the darkness. Others say they heard footsteps much heavier than their own echoing through the chamber, not their own, but hers. But first-hand accounts got stranger. One visitor swears they found muddy footprints, adult-sized, next to their child's full-grown boot print in the soft silty floor, despite no second person being present at all. When the flashlight sweep came, the prints remained, lonely and unexplained. Researchers caution, scientific scrutiny insists the cave wasn't part of the original haunting. Reports of spirits rescuing children from within, or giving prophetic warnings inside the cave, only surfaced decades later. Yet, the cave had become sublime stagecraft. It offered darkness, mystery, and fear, a perfect recipe for capturing the imagination of a viral online age. TikTok ghost hunters share eerie footage, where audio glitches mimic faint voices saying, "You're not alone." YouTube documentaries layer in cave drone footage draped in spectral filters and ominous music. Every vlog ends the same way: don't go in alone. For centuries, the Bell Witch legend has thrived on things unseen and things half remembered, a voice in the dark, a shadow in the corner, or a whisper in a tunnel. But the cave? The cave changes the game. It's where folklore becomes physical, a chilling geography where myth and earth collide. Now the question isn't just if Kate ever existed, but what might still be waiting below. Because rumors say she's not fully gone, just sleeping. So when you next stand at that cave's mouth, can you resist the pull long enough to walk out again? What if you walked into history, and it stared right back at you? Tonight, the legend of the Bell Witch isn't confined to dusty pages, it's alive, pulsing, and hunting in the dark once again. In 2025, the Bell Witch Cave, once the final hiding place of the entity known to torment John Bell's family, has reopened its doors to ghost hunters. Groups led by paranormal pros Todd and Leanne Eskew now investigate the cave, the old cabin ruins, and even nearby Native American burial grounds with EMF meters, EVP recorders, and an audience of believers. This isn't tourism, it's an active call to the supernatural. By day, it's a quiet cave. But when the sun sets, electronic devices flicker, trespassers report chilling cold spots, and even seasoned investigators swear they hear whispers like someone breathing their name. Ghost shows like Ghost Adventures and Expedition X have sent crews down that dark tunnel, and footage shows inexplicable lights, equipment failures, and a sense of being watched. Yet, it wasn't what they saw, it was who haunted them. Visitors mention a shifting silhouette at the cave entrance. Once, a dark form appeared to transform, almost merging into the rock face itself. And when the skeptic walked away, he claimed he felt something tall and unseen trailing him out into the parking lot, even though no one was there. The phenomenon is amplifying. Social media lights up with viral clips of unexplained glowing orbs, chilling EVPs, and TikTok clips titled, "When the Witch Says You're Not Alone." The Bell Witch isn't just folklore, she's re-entering the digital age. From the original scratches in the walls to tonight's EMF spikes, the Bell Witch legend continues to evolve. And the creepiest part? It's not just about the past. It's alive in Adam's shadows, energizing modern-day myth, and daring you to step inside. So if you're brave enough to sign up for one of those 2025 cave investigations, ask yourself, are you seeking proof, or are you walking into something that's already waiting for you? Ever feel like someone's watching, even when you're miles away? In 2025, the Bell Witch legend isn't just alive, it's watching you. Paranormal investigators Todd and Leanne Eskew of Black Wolf Paranormal are leading public and private investigations right in the heart of the legend, at the very titled Bell Witch Cave and the burned-down Bell Cabin. These aren't just tours, they are raw, unfiltered calls into darkness. As night falls, equipment kicks to life, EMF meters flicker, temperatures plunge, and digital recorders capture whispered syllables that vanish when replayed. At least that's the promise. On one private December tour, investigators watched the flicker of a ghost-hunting camera light go dead, only for it to reignite, casting a sharp shadow that clearly resembled a child being lowered into the earth by unseen hands. No one moved. No one spoke. And the footage? Unusable. Distorted beyond belief. But that's far from the strangest part. Locals say the cave isn't just haunted, it's alive. EMF anomalies spike in the same spots every night, visitors report footsteps echoing in tunnels they've never entered. Some record a voice so cold and slow that it freezes the blood. Why are you here? Beyond the cave, the at your peril energy lingers at the Native American burial ground and the replica cabin too, where vibrations respond to digital triggers. Light bulbs hum, axes drop, each episode a fresh blow to reasons. Social media is aflame, too. Clips flash online, orbs that dart across hallways, EVP fragments caught at the edge of hearing, and the catchphrase stirring every video, "She sees you." Is this elaborate showmanship? Maybe. But when 10 different groups report the same chilling phenomenon, voices calling their names in dead silence, skeptics start blinking. And here's the final twist: while investigators focus on the cave, the real watching happens on the drive home. One car's dashcam recorded, in fleeting reflection, a pale figure following the vehicle, its eyes glowing behind the glass, yet no one was there when they stopped to check. The Bell Witch is doing more than haunting places, she's haunting your doubts. Want to know if the witch's gaze ever fades? Or do you dare record the moment she decides to stare right back? What if fear wasn't just a story? What if it was your paycheck? In the quiet hills of Adams, Tennessee, the Bell Witch isn't just a ghost. She's an economy. The haunting legacy of the Bell family has had a tangible transformative impact on the community, turning folklore into thriving tourism. Once a sleepy rural town, Adams now vibrates each autumn with crowds spilling into the Bell Witch Cave, the replica Bell Cabin, and the surrounding farm. Lantern tours, hayrides, the annual Bell Witch Festival, everywhere you look, local guides, artisans, and storytellers bring the legend to life for wide-eyed visitors. The result? A powerful blend of fear and commerce fueling grown-up ghost hunts and family theater alike. This isn't just nostalgia, it's earnest pride. Locals embrace tours, crafts, and performances rooted in the legend as badge of heritage. Souvenirs, storytelling sessions, and ghost-themed festivals are no anomaly, they're the lifeblood of local businesses. Tourism isn't just economic, it's a reimagining of identity, woven in shadow and local lore. Here's the twist that's chilling: academics and spiritual enthusiasts aren't just dabbling, they are studying it. Beyond the haunted hayrides, universities analyze the myth's roots, how the Bell Witch reflects early 19th century superstition, religious fervor, and the power of community storytelling. Others examine how the legend mirrors social dynamics of frontier America. For some townsfolk, the witch is a specter. For others, she's living cultural DNA. Of course, skeptics push back: is the legend a commercialized ghost tale? A psychological echo of a troubled time? Or a clever marketing engine? The debate only keeps the story alive, each new version feeding the next generation's fascination. Today, the Bell Witch Cave is on the National Register of Historic Places and draws tourists year-round. Guided tours, lantern adventures, cabin explorations, those rolling Tennessee hills now pulse with whispered history and haunted commerce. From fearful barn whispers to festival lights, from journalistic accounts to academic studies, the Bell Witch has evolved. She's no longer just a ghost. She's a living myth, respected, studied, and yes, profitable. But in a place built on fear, what happens when the story fades, or the witch outlives her usefulness? Will Adams lose its ghost? Or will the legend find a new way to scare, and sustain, the town for generations more? What do you do when your town's darkest legend becomes its brightest ticket? Adams, Tennessee, population just over 600, was once a sleepy frontier hamlet. Now? It beams under the glow of ghostly fascination. The legend of the Bell Witch has redefined this tiny town, turning whispers into an economic heartbeat. Tourists don't just pass through, they arrive with cameras, EMF meters, and shivers. And local businesses? They've staked their livelihood on one haunting story. Enter the Bell Witch Cave and Farm, a curated portal into fear and history. Located just 40 miles from Nashville, this site isn't a dusty footnote, it's a full-blown attraction. Visitors buy tickets to descend into the cave where the haunting supposedly retreated. They tour the reconstructed Bell Cabin, marvel at artifacts like the chimney stone and iron kettle, and traverse a haunted hayride called Witch's Dell. Add seasonal tubing trips and lantern tours, and you've got local tourism powered by paranormal lore. But here's the kicker: it's not just thrill-seekers showing up. Folklore scholars and cultural historians are joining in the mix. Universities examine how the Bell Witch legend embodies the cultural anxieties of 19th century America: patriarchy, religious conflict, frontier fears, and marginalized women like Kate Batts becoming scapegoats. The haunt isn't only haunting, it's teaching. So in Adams, folklorists sip coffee next to ghost hunters, both chasing the same echo. For locals, it's a delicate dance between commerce and reverence. The witch sells t-shirts, guided tours, and festival tickets, but she also reminds the town of its layered identity, haunted and historic. Adams reclaimed its past, and its false starts, with a ghost that became a brand. But every legend markets itself differently. Some call it exploitation. Others, a living memorial. Still, the economic engine runs, built on nightly chills and century-old curses. Now ask yourself, in a place where myth is currency and scare is spectacle, can the line between folklore and profit survive? Or does the witch demand more than just an entrance fee? What happens when the ghost stops being legend and becomes a debate? The Bell Witch Cave, once a haunt of centuries-old terror, is now the stage for a modern clash, where shield-wielding skeptics lock horns with wide-eyed believers on hallowed ground. Academics don't just visit, they dissect. Rick Gregory's The Bell Witch. In Myth and Memory peels back the layers of folklore, showing how Old Kate transformed from 19th-century whispers into global legend as oral storytelling met radio, films, and now TikTok virality. University scholars probe how these tales reflect frontier-era anxieties, religious upheaval, and the power of communal belief. But not everyone buys it. Skeptical researchers such as Ben Radford and Brian Dunning call out the legend's shaky foundation. They zero in on Martin Ingram's 1894 account as folklore, not eyewitness fact, and argue that truth demands proof, not parody. Joe Nickell goes further, suggesting Betsy Bell might have been enacting what they call poltergeist faking syndrome, turning family anxiety into spectacle. Tonight's twist? A group of skeptical folklorists trekked into the Bell Witch Cave and walked out silent. Their skeptical analysis halted when EMF meters spiked in the same tunnel, without explanation. One recorded ghost hunter described seeing a solid ghostly figure drifting at knee height, not translucent, but solid white and undeniably human-shaped. Even the most doubtful locals aren't immune. I hope I'm wrong, but the energy down there felt wrong, one confessed. I visited once, another admitted, no chills, until I passed through that one tunnel. I stopped believing, but the feeling didn't. I've never gone back. Believers and skeptics argue over coffee and campfires, yet something undeniable remains. At that cave's mouth, legend isn't academic, it's visceral. It's here where the witch shifts from story to entity. Where belief is tested not on paper, but in shivering flesh. So when historians and ghost hunters next share space beneath those rocks, whose voice will echo louder? The scholar's logic, or the echo of, I see you? What if centuries of fear weren't a legend anymore, but one breath away from becoming yours? Visitors don't just tour the Bell Witch Cave, they emerge changed. It's not just the history that haunts them, it's what they feel. A Redditor confessed that while walking near the Bell Witch Cave, the air shifted so suddenly they felt transported into a nightmare. It was sunny, then overcast. The temperature dropped drastically, mist rose, a sulfur scent filled the air, then came deep, cavernous breathing from the woods. Once inside, another group endured wall pounding so violent it rattled the cabin, echoing like a demonic heartbeat through the night. One member hadn't slept for 2 days after. And there's the story of the daring skeptic. She leapt onto the stone marker near the old homestead, shouting, "I don't believe in the Bell Witch." And immediately they turned to escape. But it was the mist poltergeist breath following them back across open fields that froze them in place. Amateur ghost hunters capturing EVPs often catch more than audio. One claims cameras pick up mists, orbs, even shadowy figures, flickering in and out of view as if the witch herself flicks the lights. What solidifies the terror isn't hearsay, it's the pattern. During a modern paranormal investigation, dozens of devices went haywire precisely over a section of the cave floor, yet the investigator who stood there recorded a whisper that echoed perfectly. "I see you." No one else heard it. No one was there but him. These aren't tour ride thrills. They are personal experiences that spiral beyond the page. Legend has it the Bell Witch was a sharp-tongued tormentor who attacked Betsy Bell, mocked John Bell's faith, and predicted future disasters, even John's death. Today, her legacy doesn't just stay in dusty folios, it pulses in the hearts of modern-day visitors. Folklorists say that's no accident. When cumulative fear collides with environment, the line between legend and reality shimmers, and people feel it. So, when the next guest steps gingerly into the dark mouth of that cave, they're not simply visiting history. They're inviting a force that's as alive today as it was 200 years ago. What if a 200-year-old ghost refused to stay buried, and started trending instead? The Bell Witch used to be whispered about in local folk tales. Today, she's everywhere, on screens, podcasts, and playlists, haunting pop culture like a digital resurrection. Count them: podcasts, films, TV shows, even metal bands and theatrical performances, all tapping into the witch's chilling pull. Podcasts have resurrected the legend in full force. The In-Between released a 45-minute deep dive in March 2025, tracing the haunting from frontier fear to supernatural showstopper. The shadow frequency served a compact hit in just 7 minutes, calling her America's most famous haunting. Real ghost stories online got raw and reflective with Inside the Bell Witch Cave, pulling back the veil on legend versus reality. An American Haunting, 2005, hit theaters with big stars like Donald Sutherland and Sissy Spacek dramatizing the tale. TV did their part. Ghost Adventures, Haunted Live, Expedition X, and Destination America's Boogeymen, Monsters Among Us all sacrificed a spotlight to the witch. The Haunted Witch isn't just in your ear, she's on stage and in your playlist. Ballets, Spirit, The Authentic Story, and children's theater, Our Family Trouble, retell her story live. Bands named after, or inspired by, the legend span from Seattle doom metal Bell Witch to Merciful Fate's 1993 track, and folk tunes and Americana into the 2020s. Here's the twist that's weird and wild: the same haunting that reverberates in podcasts is now trending on TikTok. Dozens of creators use glitchy audio and shaky campus videos, captioned, "I think the Bell Witch just followed me." And they rack up hundreds of thousands of views overnight. A frontier-era ghost fueled by algorithms? That's living folklore at viral velocity. The Bell Witch isn't a dusty legend anymore, she's a full-blown cultural icon. From scholarly podcasts to spooky TikToks, she adapts with each generation's media pulse. She's not just remembered, she's reimagined, remixed, and retold in formats her 19th century creators could never have imagined. What if the scariest part of the Bell Witch isn't the ghost, but what we think it might be? The legend of the Bell Witch doesn't just terrify, it also divides. Tonight, we're tearing the veil between myth and reason, exploring theories that range from supernatural vengeance to shared delusion. What are you leaning toward? Some believers insist the witch was more than a ghost, she was a demon, a malevolent spirit of immense intelligence. She shapeshifted, cursed, and taunted John Bell in fevers and frenzied whispers. Some lore ties her to a disgruntled neighbor, Kate Batts, or even Native American burial spirits rooted in that very land. Others say the witch wasn't supernatural at all, but an echo of fear, stress, and conviction. Skeptics like Ben Radford and Brian Dunning argue that since the main record, Martin Ingram's 1894 account, surfaced decades after the hauntings, it's less journalism, more remodeling of myth for storytellers. Delusions and poltergeist-like behavior? Joe Nickell suggests children like Betsy may have unconsciously created the chaos, what he calls poltergeist faking syndrome. Could frontier isolation and religious pressure have created physical symptoms, twitches, paralysis, fits, without any actual curse? Psychologists see echoes of mass psychogenic illness, where groups manifest symptoms based on shared stress and folklore. It wasn't possession, it was projection. Here's something wild. One folklorist points out that belief itself is a force. Amy Fluker notes that while the witch's reality doesn't matter scientifically, the very fact people believe creates cultural memory that keeps the fear alive across centuries. So what's the truth? Demon? Delusion? Folklore run wild? Maybe it's all three. The Bell Witch lives in the blurred space between fear and understanding. The most astounding twist, the theories change. Nothing. Whether she was haunting a family, a mental breakdown, or a story reimagined, her legend endures, shaping how we fear what we cannot explain. What if the Bell Witch wasn't a ghost, but a dark reflection of Appalachian magic itself? Long before the Bell haunting, Appalachia held deep currents of power, woven from herbal lore, faith healing, and whispered spells passed down through generations. Known today as granny magic, this practice was the heart of survival in the remote hollers. Women, healers, midwives, and protectors used plant poultices, Bible passages, and ritual to shield their kin. It wasn't witchcraft, they'd say, it was faith that rooted them. Granny women carried wisdom born of necessity, catnip for infant hives, sulfur in soles against flu, and sacred tea patterns to ward off fever. They whispered verses while stitching salves, pored over herbal tomes like the long-lost friend, and wielded nails, dogwood, and yarrow as talismans of protection. Enter water witches and dowsers, those who found water deep underground with forked sticks, their skills part instinct, part magic. And POW wows, the brochure tradition, German descendants chanting Bible verses laced with folk incantations, faith sealed in folklore. Here lies our while most folk magic protected the living, some traditions sought to command unseen forces. Whispering Ezekiel's words to stop bleeding, blood stopping, as it was called, worked as both medicine and miracle to desperate mountain folk. So where does the Bell Witch fit into this tapestry? In 1817, frontier life blurred faith and folklore. When the haunting began, hearing a voice, witnessing violent poltergeist acts, what passed through the cabin walls may not have been a spirit's curse, but a manifestation of Appalachian dread and folk magic gone wild. The frontier's isolation, the pressure of faith, and the potency of granny magic meant that strange phenomena were as likely to be attributed to unseen spells as to demons. These traditions gave people language for terror, and for protection. Yet when that protective magic fractured, could it have unleashed something darker? Now, scholars see the Bell Witch through this lens, as a violent echo of Appalachian spiritual power, warped by grief, guilt, or superstition. The haunting wasn't a random poltergeist, it was legend born of living practices, rituals, and the ancient rhythm of mountain belief. So when next the wind howls through that Tennessee cave, is it a spirit unleashed? Or are the old incantations finally remembering how to speak again? What if the most chilling force wasn't a ghost, but the power of fear itself? In the eerie silence after the door slams, the real horror may lie not in the shadows, but in our heads. Psychologists say what the bells, and even the neighbors, experienced might have been mass psychogenic illness, where a community, bound by fear and stress, manifests physical symptoms without any real cause. Think fainting, shaking, whispers that sound urgent, but have no source. These are real reactions to psychological pressure. In Salem, the metaphorical parallel is clear. Communities under pressure began seeing witches. Their fear turned into symptoms, fueling more fear, a vicious cycle. Some scientists now argue these events serve as cautionary ghosts, reminders of how quickly belief can spiral. Within the Bell household, the legend started with scratches and whispers. But Betsy Bell, frightened, isolated, may have unknowingly pretended poltergeist activity, a phenomenon called poltergeist faking syndrome. Children in intense stress can invoke physical disturbances, without realizing they are doing it. The chills that visitors feel today, noises in the walls, flickering lights, could be a psychological hallucination triggered by stories alone. Walk into the cave with enough expectation, and your brain fills in the gaps with fear. The entity lives in your imagination as much as in that dark corner. Yet some researchers say belief matters. Amy Fluker sees the legend not as validation, but as cultural memory in motion. Haunted or not, the tale matters because people believe it, because memory persists in stories, emotions, rituals. The witch may be imagined, but her mirror reflects truth about those who tell her story. Add to that the theatrical spin of Martin Ingram's 1894 book, An Authenticated History of the Bell Witch. Whether fact or fiction, it shaped modern belief, blending found evidence with folklore to feel real. A 19th-century blockbuster before social media made myths viral. So is the Bell Witch a demon, a pragmatic poltergeist, or a projection of communal anxiety? Perhaps she is all three. Because when fear and expectation align, the line between myth and mind blurs, and everyone becomes part of the haunting. What if the Bell Witch didn't whisper, but recorded herself on your device? Forget dusty folklore and whispered tales in candlelight. In 2020 and beyond, investigators armed with EVP recorders, EMF meters, and cinematic cameras aim to let the Bell Witch speak for herself, and the tapes don't lie. Imagine standing in the damp, echoing heart of the Bell Witch cave. A paranormal crew tested devices as their ancestors stepped into the darkness. Suddenly, a crackling voice emerged from silence, clear, biting, "Listen to me." The letters etched in the tape's waveform weren't my imagination. That breathtaking EVP appeared in front of multiple witnesses. Lights flickered. EMF spikes surged around the cave walls, like power feeding off fear. Then, an orb shot through the void, bright, hovering, drifting through the lens just as a voice whispered, "Here I come." The camera captured the light. The audio matched the apparition. And the crew nearly broke every rule on ghost hunting in sheer terror. It's not just the paranormal pros. One visitor reported flashing orbs and EVPs on their phone, then found a clear scratch across their wrist when they emerged into daylight. No explanation. No prior injury. Just another mark left by something unseen. Other haunted recordings include voices taunting, "You're not welcome," and "Never leave," captured on unscripted EVPs during private tours. Some claim disembodied footsteps, cold touches on their backs, or being followed by invisible hands deep in the shadowed hallways. Of course, skeptics push back. They point out EVPs can be misheard audio, orbs could be dust illuminated by flash, and emotional reactions might be psychological. But when multiple groups, from weekend thrill seekers to TV pros, consistently record similar anomalies, toes of electricity, voices in empty darkness, it becomes more than coincidence. Even a heavy skeptic admitted online. The EVP they received. "Listen to me. I thought it sounded like protect me." Night after night, tape recorder in hand, the witch persists. She doesn't just exist in myth. She breathes into our devices, flickers across our lenses, and scratches into the margin between legend and evidence. Among the oldest whispers of the Appalachian Mountains is a story so strange, so haunting, that even seasoned storytellers hesitate to tell it at night. It is the tale of the Moon-Eye people, a mysterious race said to have lived in the mountains long before European settlers ever set foot on the land. According to Cherokee legends, these beings were pale-skinned, with large, round eyes so sensitive to sunlight that they could only come out at night. The stories describe them as small, almost childlike in stature, yet eerily human in their features. They lived in hidden caves, moving silently under the cover of darkness, avoiding the daylight as though it would burn them alive. To the Cherokee, they were both feared and pitied, a fragile people with unnatural traits that made them outsiders in the natural world. What makes the legend even stranger is the claim that the Moon-Eye people once fought against the Cherokee. The battles were said to be brutal, fought not in the open daylight but under the eerie glow of the moon, when the mysterious race held the advantage. Eventually, the Cherokee claimed victory, forcing the Moon-Eye people deep underground, never to be seen again. But even centuries later, travelers and settlers in the Appalachian region whispered of strange encounters, pale figures watching from caves, glowing eyes flickering in the forest, and distant voices carried on the night wind. Archaeologists have tried to connect this legend to historical possibilities. Some point to the mysterious Fort Mountain Wall in Georgia, an ancient stone structure whose origins remain unclear. Could it have been built by the Moon-Eye people as a defense against their enemies? Others suggest the legend might be rooted in encounters with early European explorers, whose pale skin and strange appearance shocked the Cherokee. But the descriptions of the Moon-Eye people don't fully match Europeans, they seem to belong to something otherworldly. The fascination with the Moon-Eye people has surged in modern times. Paranormal researchers, cryptid hunters, and history enthusiasts all debate their origins. Were they an isolated race of humans with rare genetic traits? Survivors of some forgotten civilization? Or perhaps something not human at all, wandering the earth only when the moonlight shielded them from the sun? The Appalachians are filled with caves, some of which remain unexplored to this day. Every time someone ventures into those dark, winding caverns, the old stories return to life. The idea that something pale, silent, and ancient might still be watching from the shadows is enough to chill even the bravest soul. The Moon-Eye people may never be proven real, but the legend remains one of Appalachia's most unsettling mysteries. Because sometimes, it's not the creatures that walk in the daylight we should fear, it's the ones that wait for us in the dark. In the summer of 1587, more than 100 English settlers arrived on Roanoke Island, determined to establish the first permanent English colony in the New World. But what followed became one of America's greatest historical mysteries. When the colony's governor, John White, returned to England for supplies, he was delayed by war with Spain. By the time he finally came back in 1590, 3 years later, the colony was completely deserted. Houses were dismantled, no signs of struggle were found, and the only clue carved into a wooden post was a single word, Croatoan. For centuries, historians, archaeologists, and storytellers have debated the fate of the so-called lost colony. Some believe the settlers were killed by hostile tribes, while others argue they assimilated into the Croatoan people, now known as the Hatteras tribe. Still others think disease, starvation, or even something more sinister ended their lives. The absence of graves, bodies, or conclusive evidence has only deepened the enigma. What makes the Roanoke mystery so gripping today is its eerie simplicity. An entire community vanished without leaving behind an explanation. It's not just a story of survival or failure, it's a story that forces us to confront the fragility of human existence in an unknown world. To this day, documentaries, podcasts, and social media discussions continue to fuel theories about what really happened. Each year, new discoveries, like European artifacts found on Hatteras Island, spark fresh debates and keep the legend alive. The mystery of Roanoke isn't just about the past, it represents the eternal human fear of the unknown. A thriving settlement, full of hope and ambition, disappeared as if swallowed by the land itself. And the single word, Croatoan, still taunts us across more than 400 years, reminding us that some questions may never have an answer.